All right. In Unit 1, Lab number 1, Part 2, we're going to be looking at converting some data. We're going to use sample data that might be close to what you got in Part 1 of the lab, but it doesn't have to be exactly the same or anything like that. We're just using sample data so we can all kind of make our conversions from the same starting point. Makes it a lot easier to work through. So in the metric system, when we make conversions, we don't really have to do a whole lot of math for it. We have instead prefixes like kilo and milli you've probably heard of, like kilometers or kilometers or kilograms or kilograms, okay, or millimeters or centimeters or milliseconds and things like that. These prefixes describe how big or small our unit is. So rather than having to make a whole conversion to a totally different unit, like how we have to go from ounces to pounds, or we have to go from inches to feet in the US customary system, in the metric system, we keep the same base unit. Like how in this first example, I'm going to keep with grams, which we use a little g for. And instead of changing that unit, I'm still talking about grams, which is a kind of mass, but I put a prefix in the front of it, like this K for kilo or this M for milli, that talks about how big or small that unit is. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be trying to change 4.3 grams into kilograms and milligrams. And we're going to do some other examples too. I recommend using a pencil or a stylus to work out these problems as you go. You don't need to turn in your work. You don't even need to show work if you can do it in your head. But it helps you to not make mistakes. So let's look at how we can convert in the metric system. So base units like grams or liters or seconds or joules for energy or meters for length start on this chart, kind of in this little middle section here. So this is where we would have our grams or liters, meters, seconds. Energy would be joules, big J. We don't use that very often in our everyday lives. So some of these, like seconds, and meters, are pretty common. You probably heard grams too, and liters. So if I want to talk about a bigger or smaller amount of that, I can use these prefixes to describe that. Stuff on the left, like kilo and hecto and deca, are for bigger amounts of that base unit. Like a kilogram is a bigger amount of mass than a regular gram. Okay, and these over on the right, deci, centi, milli, are smaller. So like a millimeter is smaller than a meter. It's like way smaller. Okay, now the nice thing about the metric system is all of these units change just by a factor of 10. So like a decameter is just 10 times as big as a meter. And a hectometer is 10 times as big as a decameter. And a kilometer is 10 times as big as a hectometer, and things like that. We can go the same way between our base unit and deci and centi, but it would be like 10 times smaller. It'd be like dividing by 10 each time. Okay, this means that instead of having to actually go and multiply and divide and things like that, since we're just going by a factor of 10, we can just move the decimal place. And the way that we move on this chart is the same way our decimal place moves. So let's show this with this example, converting 4.3 grams into kilograms and milligrams. I'm going to scroll this down a little bit. Move these out of the way for now. Okay, so I'm starting with 4.3 grams. That's my starting amount, and it's my base unit. Not because it's what I'm starting with, but because it's just grams. It's regular grams. It's not centigrams. It's not decagrams. It's just regular old grams. That's a base unit. Okay, now if I want to change it to have a prefix, it's going to end up in one of these spots on the side. So if I'm trying to convert from 4.3 grams into kilograms, well, that's all the way over here on this chart. So I'd have to move 3 spots to the left on this chart to get from regular grams to kilograms. My decimal place is going to do the same thing. So if I'm moving 3 spots to the left on this chart, I'm going to go past this 4, past a blank, past a blank. My decimal place is going to wind up over here. Okay, now what goes in these spots where I just had blanks? I didn't have a number to move past. Like for this first part, I was moving past the 4, and that makes some sense. But then blanks, okay. Well, if you move past a blank, we just throw in a 0. like that. So 4.3 grams is the same as saying 0.0043 grams. Oh, sorry, kilograms. Let me just change the unit. Kilograms, like that. Okay, so 0.0043 kilograms is the same amount of mass as 4.3 grams. It just looks a little different. It's a different way of describing it. Okay, since it's a bigger unit, our number is smaller compared to our 4.3 grams. Kilograms is talking about a bigger amount of stuff, so we don't have as many kilograms in our sample. Let's do another one. So let's say this is back to 4.3 grams. Now I'm trying to change this into milligrams this time. Well, milli prefix is over here. So I'd have to go from my 4.3 gram, my base unit, 1, 2, 3 spots to the right. So my decimal point is again going to do the same thing. I'm going to move my grams unit out of the way for a second so I can move my decimal point a little bit easier. But this is going to go past the 3, past a blank, stop right there. And then again, wherever I have blanks, I just fill in zeros. So I'm going to 0 here, I'm going to have a 0 here, and there we go. So this 4.3 grams is also the same as saying 4,300 milligrams. Okay, so whichever one you do, we're talking about the same amount of stuff. The mass is the same. 0.0043 kilograms has the same amount of mass as 4.3 grams, which has the same amount of mass as 4,300 milligrams. We're just changing how the number looks because our unit is going to be a little bit bigger or smaller, just like how 12 inches is the same length as a foot. The number is different, but so is the unit. In this case, we're just changing the prefix, which is a lot easier than doing a whole conversion to a totally different unit. Let's do another one. Convert 29.1 grams into decigrams and decagrams. So let me change up my color here. All right, so again, we're starting at regular grams. So I'm going to be right here, 29.1 grams. Okay, this time I'm changing into decigrams first. So deci, it's just prefix D is right there. So I'm just moving one spot to the right. Okay, so my decimal point is just going to move one spot to the right. So 29.1 grams is the same as saying 291, my decimal point lands there, grams, like that. Okay, not too bad. Now, deci and deca are easy to get mixed up because they both start with D, but they are two different prefixes. Deci is the smaller one, deca is the bigger one. So deci, to the right, deca, we're going to the left. So we're talking about a bigger unit. So to change from 29.1 grams into decagrams, DA instead of just D, we're moving one spot to the left. So my decimal point is going past the 9 and then stopping there. So that would be like saying, my answer is, ooh, that was really bad, 9. I'm going to try that again. I'm going to try this equal sign again too. Let's try this again. That's a little better. Okay, so my 29.1 grams converted to decagrams is 2.91, and then my unit is now DAG for decagrams, and I forgot to change the unit on this one too. DAG, that's my bad. This one should be regular old D for decigrams, and this guy should be DA for decagrams. So 2.91 decagrams is the same as 29.1 grams, which is the same as 291, and the decimal points there, decigrams. Okay, these are all talking about the same amount of mass. Okay, and like you've seen from me doing this, it's easy to forget to change the actual unit after you've changed the number. So just be careful of that. Okay, make sure you move your decimal place and change your unit. Otherwise, we're just making a different number or we're just making a different unit. We got to do both. All right, let's keep going. Convert 4.6 grams into centigrams and decigrams. All right, again, starting with the base unit of grams. Let's do pink this time. So 4.6 grams. We're starting here. If we're going to convert into centigrams, well, centi is over here. So I'm moving from regular grams to centigrams. I'm moving 2 spots to the right. So I'm going to get rid of the grams unit again so I can move this a little bit easier. So I'm going to move past the 6, past a blank. Okay, my decimal point is going to end up there. So that would be the same as saying 4, 6, and I fill in a 0 where this blank was 0. My decimal point lands there. My new unit is centigrams, so that's CG. That time I didn't forget. So 4.6 regular grams is the same as saying 460 centigrams. Okay, we change that to decigrams. Let's do this kind of light blue, I guess. It's going to be hard to read. Let's do green. Okay. Now, what if we changed from the centigrams to the decigrams? Could it work the same way? Let's try both. So let's try changing from the 4.6 grams first. 4.6 grams. Moving over to decigrams would be like just going 1 spot to the right. So 4.6 grams is the same as saying 46 point nothing. And now that uses DG for decigrams. But what if we came from the centigram side? What if we want to change centigrams back to decigrams? Does that work? Can I continue to kind of keep changing my units? So let's try that. Let's try going from my 460 centigrams and changing to decigrams. Well, in this case, I'm starting from the centi prefix. I'm going to start with 460 decimal point centigrams, and I'm moving 1 spot to the left. Well, if I start with 460 centigrams and I move 1 spot to the left, that goes past the 0, and I wind up with, 46. My decimal point's right there, and my new unit is DG for decigrams. So I wound up with the same thing. I get 46 decigrams whether I started with my regular grams from here or I started with my centigrams from here. As long as you keep track of which direction you're going and how many decimal points you're moving, you should be fine. Okay, and again, make sure you're using the right data to do your conversions. So if you decide you're going to do centigrams back to decigrams, but then you use this number of grams, that's not starting with centigrams. So make sure you actually start with your amount of whatever you're trying to convert, and you go from that unit to the other unit. As long as you know where you start and end and how many spots you move in what direction, you're good to go. Okay. Speaking of which, you don't always have to start at the base unit. So let's look at some examples where we're starting with something not just regular meters or regular grams. In this case, we're going to start with centimeters. So in this case, I'm not starting with 13.6 centimeters, and this is my base unit because that's the number I started with at the beginning. No, this 13.6 centimeters starts right here. Okay, that's where the centi prefix is. Okay, so now if I want to convert from there, I'm starting from centi and I'm moving to something else. In this case, I want to go to hectometers, which is over here. So I'm going to be moving 1, 2, 3, 4 spots to the left, and my decimal point will do the same thing. It's going to move past the 3, past the 1, past a blank, and land right there. So it's going to be 0.0013. My 6 is still there too. All right, and my new unit is H for hecto, and then M for meters, so HM for hectometers. All right, so 0.00136 hectometers is the same as 13.6 centimeters. There's a different way of writing it with a different prefix. Talk about different size of units. Okay, hectometers is a longer unit than centimeters, so our number is smaller because we don't go quite to that length of a whole hectometer. Let's do another example. Okay, let's go from our hectometers to decameters. Okay. You could start from centi and go over to deca and go 3 spots to the left. But I mean, we're already pretty close here. So why don't we just scooch on over? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start from this 0.00136 hectometers. And I'm just going to move 1 spot to the right to get to decameters. Okay, so if I move 1 spot to the right, it's going to go past that 0 and stop. So this is going to be 0.0136. And now my unit is dA for deca, and then M for meters, decameters. Okay, now again, you could go from centimeters over to decameters, and you should get the same answer as long as you're careful about how many spots you're moving, from which spot to which spot, and what direction you're going. Let's look at one more set of examples, or I guess 2 more. Well, maybe 1 more. We'll just do 1 more, I think. Keep it shorter. All right, convert 170 centimeters into kilometers and millimeters. Okay, well, let's see here. Let's do purple. All right, so in this case, again, I'm starting with centimeters, which is right here. 170 centimeters. I'm trying to change into kilometers or kilometers. So let's start with that one. So I'm going to be moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots to the left. That's a lot. Okay. But I don't have a decimal place here. It just says 170. So where do I put the decimal place to start it? Okay. The decimal point, if you don't see it, always goes at the end of the number on the right. Okay. So this is actually 170, and then the decimal point is right there after that last 0. It's 170 point centimeters. So now if I move 5 spots to the left from there, I'm going past the 0, past the 7, past the 1, past a blank, past a blank. It's going to wind up there. So that's like saying 170 centimeters is the same as 0.0017. And if you want, you can write the 0. Just keep it there. All right, and now instead of centimeters, it's in kilometers. All right. Now, just for funsies, we can go all the way back from kilometers to our new unit, millimeters, but I'll show again how it's going to be winding up the same thing. So if I wanted to change from this 0.00170 kilometers into millimeters, I'd be moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots to the right. So now I'm moving like all the way back. So we're going from 0.00170 km, past the 0, past the 0, past the 1, past the 7, past the 0, past a blank, and landing right there. So this would be the same as writing 170, 0 for that blank, decimal point there. And these zeros that were out in front, that were like here and here, I don't need anymore. Like when you write 10, you don't write 010. Or if you are writing 23, you don't write 00023. You just write 23, right? The zeros coming later are important, but the ones before are not. So I'm just going to leave it like that, 1700, and now my unit is millimeters. MM for millimeters. Okay, and again, we could have made that conversion just from here. Let's do green this time. If I started with this 170 centimeters, centimeters, and I wanted to convert to millimeters, I'm just moving 1 spot to the right from centi to milli. My decimal point starts at the end. I'm moving 1 spot to the right. So this is going to be the same as saying 1700 millimeters. My decimal point's right there. My 0 kind of looks like a 6. Let me scooch that down a little bit. 1700 decimal point millimeters, like that. And I got the same answer, no matter which one I started with. Okay, the last thing I'll say is if you have a small number like this, don't let it mess you up. okay, 0.5 centimeters, is going to work the same as any of these other things. Okay, like we saw in some examples, sometimes we have a bunch of zeros at the beginning, sometimes we have a bunch of zeros at the end, and that's okay. Okay, just make sure you're moving your decimal point. What's going on here? Just make sure you move your decimal point from where it's starting in the number. And if you don't see that decimal point, okay, it's at the very end of the number. Okay, if like you just have something like 170, it's at the very end of that number. All right, hopefully this gives you an idea of how to proceed with the other problems you're going to see in this part of the lab. Good luck. And don't forget to make multiple attempts. Okay, if you mess something up, go back, try it again, get those points.